Hello there, I'm Joshua Johnson. It's great to be with you on this Monday, May 16th. And tonight, we're talking about the latest deadly mass shootings in America. One shooting in Buffalo, New York, killed 10 people. One apparent motivation, a paranoid myth about whites being systematically replaced. This weekend saw mass shootings in California, Texas, and Wisconsin. What can be done to stop the next one? Then we'll focus on the world's food supply. Some call Ukraine the breadbasket of Europe, but Russia's invasion is leaving many cupboards bare around the world. A top official from the World Food Program joins us live. Meanwhile, the U.S. government has a plan to restart one of the nation's top baby formula plants. We'll update where things stand and consider whether the plan could work. And tomorrow, 5 states hold primary elections. We'll run through the races and have a preview from Pennsylvania. What can we say that's new about America's old problem of gun violence? The shooting in Buffalo has a lot of familiar hallmarks, including the alleged shooter, a young white man apparently targeting black people. The rampage left 10 dead and 3 wounded. It happened on Saturday at a supermarket in a predominantly black part of Buffalo, New York. 11 of the 13 victims are black. Half are senior citizens. Investigators say 18-year-old Peyton Gendron drove more than 200 miles from home to this market. He's been arraigned on murder charges and faces a federal hate crime investigation. Buffalo's police commissioner said the shooter talked about possibly going to another store to kill more black people. If only this was this weekend's only mass shooting, the only incident with 4 or more casualties. But there were many more, including in Houston and Milwaukee and in Southern California. In fact, according to a data collection group called the Gun Violence Archive, the U.S. has had more than 200 mass shootings this year so far. What would possess someone to do a thing like this? In a moment, we'll get into how the internet might factor in. But let's begin in Buffalo, New York, with NBC's Emily Ikeda standing by outside the supermarket where this happened. Emily, tell us how folks are doing there tonight, particularly in light of what investigators said, that this could have been so.
Yeah, absolutely. Emotions are understandably running high here. Investigators say that if police had not arrived within a minute, they believe that the shooter, the suspected shooter, would have continued his rampage. In officials' words, continuing to target as many black people as possible. This hate-fueled attack sparking so many emotions, from confusion to fear to anger. Listen here.
But we're not just hurting, we're angry, we're mad. This shouldn't have happened.
He took away my mother and my best friend. How dare you? How dare you? This needs to be fixed.
And it feels like we learn new disturbing details with each passing day. The police commissioner says that we knew that the suspect had been scoping out this area the day before the attack, but now he's also confirming that the suspect is believed to have been in Buffalo several months ago, back in March, and several employees that I spoke with have been echoing that timeline. One woman who works at the supermarket told me that she, as soon as the pictures started coming up showing the suspected shooter, she immediately recognized him, and she says that he had approached her back in March and made the comment to this woman, notably white, "You should not belong here." Joshua?
What about the suspected shooter's past run-ins with the police, previous threats? What more do we know about his past?
So back in June, school officials had notified the New York State Police after the suspect had made threatening statements at the school. That prompted police to come and transport him to a hospital where he was evaluated, a mental health evaluation. Police explained to me then that really is turned over to the doctors in terms of what the next steps would be, and that the suspect had been released within a day and a half or so. Joshua.
Now, the supermarket, that top supermarket behind you, is going to be closed for a while, and that's got to be hard on that community, especially since I don't believe there are a lot of other supermarkets around, if any.
Yeah, that's right. This is somewhat of a food desert. Officials say this is really the only supermarket within walking distance for most of the people within the community. So this incident has really cut off access to food for so many people. But they say it's a centerpiece not just because of its access to food, but also because it's a gathering point. This is where so many people come to shop, but also they see each other, they reunite. And for that reason, police say they want to try to reopen it as quickly as possible. Take a listen here.
This process is painstaking. It takes time, and we will continue as quickly as possible to process that scene so it can be released back to this community, which relies on this grocery store so much. But I will say, we have to take our time. We have to be methodical. That is what the victims of this horrible tragedy deserves.
And in the meantime, ride-sharing services are offering free rides for members of this community to help them get to other grocery stores. There are shuttles, there are nearby food giveaways. And then the other thing I want to bring up, Joshua, is another population that has been impacted from this really devastating incident, and that's some of the first responders who were on scene and witnessed that bloodshed. The sheriff, Erie County Sheriff, telling NBC News tonight that he believes if the two officers who first responded and approached the suspect and convinced him to surrender had not been white, that the suspect may have reacted even differently, and we could be talking about an even higher death toll, Joshua.
Before I got to let you go, I know President Biden and the First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, are planning to head to Buffalo tomorrow. Do we have any idea what to expect from their visit?
So still limited details when it comes to their timeline, but President Biden is expected to meet with families of the victims, offer their condolences, a listening ear. He has previously called this mass shooting senseless. He's called this the hate-fueled attack a stain on the soul of this nation. Joshua.
Thank you, Emily. That's NBC's Emily Ikeda starting us off tonight from Buffalo, New York. It seems like the alleged shooter telegraphed his motivations for this attack. Apparently, he also wanted the world to watch him kill people live online. Before the shooting, he posted a racist, anti-Semitic, and xenophobic diatribe in a Google Doc that was nearly 200 pages long. The document repeatedly cites a conspiracy theory called the Great Replacement Theory. It's a paranoid hoax claiming that a cabal of Jews is systematically replacing whites with people of color. Immigration and interracial marriage are the prime methods. How does someone fall into such paranoia? In some corners of the web, it's very easy to find. Let's continue now with NBC technology correspondent Jake Ward. And Jake, I wonder if you could start with just the presence of this kind of ideology on the web. It's not rare, unfortunately. It is increasingly prevalent, but we've got an idea of the kinds of corners of the web where this sort of ideology is found.
That's right. I mean, this sort of terrible ideology, Joshua, sprouts up all over the web and just unfortunately takes form even in places where it seems like the conversation should ostensibly be about much more casual, sometimes even humorous topics. It's a strange world that weaves together terrible conspiracy theories and radicalizing forces like this with the sort of everyday back and forth you might expect from users of these platforms. So we have here this horrific and false ideology pushed forward, and then this shooter putting the time into a 180-page manifesto that specifically cites it. And as we've been saying for years, I know you have and I certainly have, what we do online turns out to be real life, not just our online lives. We're seeing that in a horrible way now.
You talked in your recent book, The Loop, about sometimes how these online rabbit holes can create a sense of community that spins out of control in ways that even the users don't necessarily expect. Elaborate on that a little bit more in terms of what a person like this, and we're still early in the investigation, but in terms of what people get out of falling into these hate-filled communities online. They're not looking necessarily for hateful rhetoric, but they still get into it and latch onto it.
It is extraordinary. There seem to be patterns slowly emerging in the ways that people find radicalizing forces online. I have interviewed former white supremacist radicals who essentially say, I didn't even understand that I was falling into this as I did. One of them described it to me as being like on an escalator, moving so slowly you cannot tell you are descending until you are at that basement floor. It really is the case that over and over again you see them referencing one another. Multiple shooters like this alleged shooter have cited Brenton Tarrant, the shooter in the 2019 Christchurch mosque shooting, and the manifesto that he put online, which cited many of the same things. He visited many of the same sites. It is very much the case that when you have, in this case, disaffected, very lonely, and in some cases perhaps mentally ill people alone looking at these sites, more and more they find common cause with one another, a sort of a language develops around their rhetoric, and in this case, we're now seeing users whose identifiable characteristics seem to match this alleged shooter's characteristics. Whoever that person was seems to have been posting not just ideas, but to-do lists on these various platforms. So definitely people finding not just common cause, but something of a mechanism that helps them organize their thoughts and execute something like this terrible thing, Joshua.
One of the other items on the to-do list that seems to come up increasingly, unfortunately, is live streaming the attack as it's happening. This one involved a platform called Discord, which I think is better known for people in terms of like the gaming community, streaming games online, platforms like Discord and Twitch and so on. How are they responding to this? Discord in particular, I believe, released a statement today.
It did, that's right. Discord is a place where this alleged shooter evidently spent a great deal of time on a guns and body armor portion of the site referred to as Plateland. Now, in a statement, the company said, "We extend our deepest sympathies to the victims and their families. Hate and violence have no place on Discord. We are doing everything we can to assist law enforcement in the investigation." And you mentioned Twitch, which seems to be, it's typically, a place where video game players can watch one another, but it seems to have been the place here where he began streaming his actions. Twitch says that within the first couple of minutes, they took it down, but it was not long before that video began to pop up everywhere, and it seems to be all across the web now, Joshua.
We should be clear, by the way, for people who are watching this who are not familiar with like gaming, streaming on the web, Discord and Twitch are they're just platforms where you find subject matter from different people and just you kind of go and geek out over the same kind of stuff, whether it's gaming or anime or whatever. So they're not about this kind of violent extremism, but they are convenient, increasingly convenient platforms for talking about this kind of thing, which we know at least the FBI, Jake, has been paying attention to. We heard from the FBI director, Chris Wray, about this not too long ago. Here's part of what Director Wray said.
What I can tell you is that within the domestic terrorism bucket, category as a whole, racially motivated violent extremism is, I think, the biggest bucket within that larger group. And within the racially motivated violent extremist bucket, people ascribing to some kind of white supremacist type ideology is certainly the biggest chunk of that.
So that's Director Wray speaking in fall of 2020, and he said, so within domestic terrorism, you've got racially motivated violent extremism, biggest chunk of that, white supremacist extremism. It's not a crime to hold white supremacist views, that's protected by the First Amendment, but once it turns into violence, that's obviously not. So how is the U.S. government trying to figure out what to do about this, especially since there are places online where you can watch this kind of ideology sort of spring up and become active?
This is the most sort of horrible challenge that stands in front of law enforcement and even the researchers trying to get their arms around how we could possibly get out in front of something like this in the past. Social media, we know, is now an extraordinary way to keep tabs on sentiment. It's not always an accurate representation of what's going on in real life. People tend to say the most extreme things on social media, but it is a way of keeping tabs on all sorts of ideas ideas and memes and the rest of it. Unfortunately, what it does not turn out to be very good at is being a way for law enforcement to get out in front of violence. A 2021 internal review of the DHS Office of Intelligence and Analysis, which is its big office for looking at this sort of thing, essentially found that searching for true threats of violence before they happen is a difficult task filled with ambiguity. One FBI report famously described what they receive in these sorts of broad looks at social media as being, quote unquote, crap. You know, it is very, very hard to take the billions of people who post every day and turn that into any kind of discernible, you know, pre-crime sort of analysis system. What we do know is that you can look on those sites and understand the growth of some of this ideology, and we're definitely seeing now the ways in which that feedback loop is coming back into even mainstream political circles, even mainstream broadcasters, where they are beginning to pick up this stuff from the dark corners of the web and then espouse it on a news broadcast. We're beginning to see that happening, and it's very clear that for law enforcement, the utility of social media, not very much. For the shooters and for actual researchers who want to look at the motives behind those shooters, social media has been extremely helpful, but that's about as far as it goes right now, Joshua.
Jake, I'm way over time, but in just our last 10 seconds, if there's parents who are looking at this like, Jesus Christ, I don't know what my kids are looking at online. They could be falling into this rabbit hole, and I have no idea. What would you say to them, very quickly?
I think it's incredibly important to stay on top of it. You should not leave your child alone with the internet or social media. Engage them on it, because what they do online is their real life. That's the message I'd give you.
Thank you, Jake. That's NBC Tech correspondent Jake Ward. Let's head now to Southern California, where another mass shooting seems to have a very different motivation. One person is dead and 5 elderly people are injured. The suspect is 68-year-old David Cho, resident of Las Vegas. He's a U.S. citizen who immigrated from China. Mr. Cho faces 1 count of murder and 5 counts of attempted murder. Orange County police say he was angry about the political tensions between China and Taiwan. Today, the FBI opened a hate crimes investigation, and that's where the shooting happened, at the Geneva Presbyterian Church in Laguna Woods, California. It's a retirement city between L.A. and San Diego. Why target that church? Perhaps because its congregation is Taiwanese. Police say the church's members detained the alleged shooter, hog-tying his legs with electrical cords. They also took at least 2 of his weapons. Unfortunately, a doctor in the room was shot dead trying to disarm the gunman. NBC's Maggie Vespa is here now with more. Maggie, what more do we know about this doctor, Dr. John Chang, as well as what happened in the church that day?
Sure, Joshua. Authorities calling Dr. Chang an absolute hero, saying without him doing what he did and stepping up in that way, there would have undoubtedly been more bloodshed, more killings inside that church yesterday. They say Dr. Chang was there with his mother. Again, you mentioned most of the people in that room were retirees up into their 90s. Dr. Chang, in his early 50s, said that authorities said he saw people being shot, and a lot of them maybe weren't very mobile, couldn't move out of the room quickly. And so he decided, authorities said, to rush the gunman. And they said as he did that, he was shot once, but was still able to get to the gunman and kind of tackle him. And that's when authorities said the gunman, the shooter, tried to shoot Dr. Chang a second time, and the gun jammed. And that's when congregates were able to kind of swoop in with Dr. Chang, who's then wounded, and tackle the gunman, subdue him, and hog-tie him, they said, with those extension cords. They also were able to confiscate 2 handguns from the gunman and keep him there until deputies arrived. So deputies calling everyone, the way everyone acted together, exceptional heroism, but especially, as you can imagine, Dr. Chang, who lost his life in the process.
Maggie, what more do we know about the victims and how they're doing tonight?
Sure. So 6 people shot total. Dr. Chang was one of them. And again, he lost his life. So with the 5 others, deputies gave kind of an update on their conditions. We don't know their names at this point, but we know of the 5 remaining, 4 had been critically wounded. And basically, deputies said a majority of the victims are recovering. 2 are in stable condition, 2 are in good condition. They weren't able to give an update on the 5th. And again, we don't have names, but we know it's 4 men, 1 woman, ages roughly 66 to 92. So we'll keep tabs on that for sure, Joshua.
With regard to the motivation behind this, China and Taiwan obviously have a lot of heat geopolitically.
Right.
For those who may not have followed the saga there, Taiwan, an island about 100 miles off the coast of China. You can see it highlighted there on the map. It's got long-standing designs China has to take over Taiwan. Taiwan is a very young democracy. Taiwan's a very young democracy. China doesn't really recognize it as a sovereign nation. Are investigators saying anything more about the possible motivations behind this shooting? I mean, Las Vegas and Orange County are not next door. He drove about 4.5 to 5.5 hours to get to this church.
He did, and authorities were blunt. They said a couple times, basically, they didn't want to release too many details, given that this is a new investigation, and they want to make sure they're incredibly thorough for obvious reasons. But they did note, as you said, David Chao, the man now charged in this deadly mass shooting, was born in China. He's from China. They said he's been in the States for years, and he's lived in multiple states since coming here, including Texas and now Nevada. They said at some point earlier in his life, he lived in Taiwan. And the way they described it was basically saying he wasn't well received in Taiwan. Beyond that, they didn't want to say why, or they said they didn't know actually at this point why he chose that church, why he drove to that church. They believe he drove to Orange County on Saturday, but they said they have no connection, or he has no connection that they know of to this church. And the LA Times reporting that he also walked into the church moments before he started shooting, and parishioners greeted him. They didn't recognize him, but they were nice to him. And he told them that he'd been to services at their church before, and some of them said they were confused because they didn't know this guy. Moments later, he opened fire. So they say they do have evidence to support that theory of hatred in this case, but a lot of questions remaining at this point.
Maggie, before I let you go, how are local leaders and elected officials reacting to this shooting? There have been a few violent crimes in Southern California that have been fairly high profile, and they varied tremendously from the very high-profile deadly home invasion that killed Jacqueline Avant to now this attack. How are local leaders reacting to this, and what do they say they want done?
Sure. I mean, we heard kind of initial reactions from a city councilwoman who talked about her family having been to that church before, knowing people at that church. She is Taiwanese, and she just talked about how horrified everybody was that the violence had hit so close to home, and the idea of needing to unite against hatred. Also worth noting, California Governor Gavin Newsom's office pretty quickly tweeted that they were watching the situation, saying no one should be afraid to basically be in their church, be in their place of worship. California is famous for having some of the strictest gun laws in the country, and they've made news recently trying to enact gun laws that would make it easier for Americans to sue gun makers. In some cases, at this point, we're not hearing much talk of policy and much talk about gun control from these local leaders, but we may expect that in the coming days. Joshua.
Yeah, California is such a diverse state when it comes to Asians and Asian Americans, and for a community that's already dealt with so much violence, I'm sure this is the very last thing that anybody wanted. Thank you, Maggie. That's NBC's Maggie Vespa with the latest on the shooting in Southern California. Still to come, NATO may have 2 new members soon. How might admitting Finland and Sweden affect the war in Ukraine? We're live in Kyiv with the latest. And this war is being felt at dinner tables around the world. We'll get into that with an executive with the World Food Program. We're glad you're with us on this Monday for Now Tonight from NBC News. The war in Ukraine is leading some countries to rethink their alliances. That includes Sweden and Finland. Both countries are set to apply for membership in NATO. And as you can see, they are very close to Russia. Finland shares an 800-some-odd-mile border with Russia. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said the group could expedite Sweden's and Finland's applications. He added that he believes Russia's invasion is not going as planned, saying, quote, Ukraine can win this war, unquote. Meanwhile, Ukraine's defenses near the northern border seem to be holding around the city of Kharkiv. Ukrainian forces appear to have reached the border and pushed back Russian troops. One group of fighters posed with the border sign they restored. NBC's Cal Perry joins us now with more from Kyiv. And Cal, what's our sense of how Russia is likely to respond now that both Finland and Sweden have said that they want to be NATO members and have kind of begun the process of doing it?
Yeah, so look, I think in the last 48 hours, there was expectations that we could hear saber rattling from Vladimir Putin, the Russian president. What we heard, in fact, today was him saying that it's, quote, not an immediate threat. So sort of downplaying the fact that Sweden has decided to follow and to join. Now, there was the shutoff of electricity to one of these two countries, obviously, in the last 48 hours, but nothing major. There was some discussion today at the Kremlin that maybe they would move military assets around depending on how this went. But again, we did not hear the kind of saber rattling from Putin that we expected. Now, that said, here on the ground in the last 2 hours, the western city of Lviv has been, come under fire from at least what appears to be a dozen cruise missiles. Now, it seems like the majority of those have been shot out of the sky and didn't impact their targets, but there's some questioning here on the ground whether or not there's a connection, maybe Vladimir Putin doing things here on the ground to respond to what is happening diplomatically around the world, but obviously it's impossible to tell.
Tell us more about this Ukrainian counteroffensive in Kharkiv, which is like northeastern Ukraine. It seems like they were able, at least from the reports, to push back Russian invading forces. What would that mean strategically and, frankly, symbolically in this war?
Yeah, so this seems like a big deal in both those respects, both on the battlefield and symbolically. What we had heard from Ukrainian officials, and you see Kharkiv there, as you said, in the sort of northeastern part of the country along the border there with Russia. We had heard from officials, and what we heard from the Pentagon earlier today was that Ukrainian forces in this counterattack had pushed Russian forces back about 4 kilometers from the border. They had liberated 6 villages. I had told you on Friday it was 4 villages. 2 then fell over the weekend. But then we had this video that you showed in your intro, which I think is really stunning, of this platoon of Ukrainian soldiers having made their way to the border itself with Russia and basically taking time to pose in front of that border post. Here's some more of that combat video that we're seeing from Kharkiv as these villages are cleared. This is not only symbolically huge, as you've laid out, but strategically it has Russia on the move. It has Russia back on its side of the border, at least some of these elements, and then you have coming into play these long-range American artillery pieces, these howitzers, which will then go into place, which, as we've been talking about, could keep Russia on that side of the border. So it does seem like a major military victory and possibly, look, a wake-up call for Vladimir Putin, who we assume is going to see video of, again, Ukrainian soldiers right up against the border with Russia now, Joshua.
A few more things before I got to let you go. We had been talking about this Azov-style steel plant in Mariupol, which is in kind of southeastern Ukraine. Hundreds of Ukrainian fighters were evacuated from there. Do we know anything more about where they are and how they're doing?
So 264 evacuated, 53 of them severely wounded. They've gone to a town in eastern Ukraine that is controlled by the Russians. So they've gone to occupied eastern Ukraine. If it sounds uncomfortable, it's because it's going to be very uncomfortable. We don't know the circumstances there. We do know the Red Cross and the United Nations are overseeing that. So they're basically turning themselves over to Russian control, but under the understanding, according to Ukrainian officials, that there will be a swap in the near future for Russian prisoners of war, POWs. We don't know how many Russians. We don't know when that swap will happen. Those are the only details of this evacuation. And again, it's just happened in the last few hours. So we're hoping tomorrow we'll hear more from the government, Joshua.
There's a cultural story surrounding Ukraine that I think is worth digging into. I don't know how many people are watching us from around the world, including in Europe. It's not a big a deal in the U.S. unless you've seen that Netflix movie with Will Ferrell where he kind of lampoons it. But the Eurovision Song Contest was over the weekend, where European nations each pick an act and they submit the act, they perform, and then voters around Europe vote for their favorite song. Well, Ukraine won Eurovision this year. I know there were some people who question the win. Every year they question whether the winning song should have been the winning song. But what is the significance of Ukraine winning Eurovision at a time like this when there's so much else going on?
And believe me, you have never covered a war in Ukraine until you've watched Eurovision in a hotel room with local Ukrainian producers who are going absolutely clinically insane over this competition, which, again, for folks watching in America, like, this competition is so entertaining. It's kind of completely bizarre. And it's in many ways a popularity contest for European countries. And there's the private voting, which countries do, and then there's the public voting, the phone-in voting. And Ukraine just killed it in the phone-in voting. So after the kind of countries voted, they were like in 5th or 6th place, and then the phone-in votes came, and Ukraine wins, and at the end, and this is the group, they say, Slava to Ukraine, long live our heroes, and help the city of Mariupol. The significant part of this, and there is a significant part of it other than just it was hugely entertaining, and Ukraine won, and Europe kind of came together and celebrated. The significant bit of it is the winning country gets to host the competition next year. So Ukraine will get to host this competition next year, and President Zelensky, not missing any opportunity to jump on this, said that hopefully next year, or in the near future, he said, they will host it in Mariupol. Now, next year, we expect it to be held in Kyiv, but it gives you an idea the importance of the competition. Importance of the competition aside, people here really did need, I think, a break from the war on television, and they got it with this competition, which was very entertaining.
Yeah, and I think for President Zelensky to say that it will be hosted in Mariupol, like that's a huge deal, right? Sitting on the Sea of Azov, one of those places that the Russians are very much surrounding and quite in control of. That's a bold statement, but I think also, if you're watching from the Ukrainian side or the Western side of this war, definitely a hopeful statement right now. Thank you, Cal. That's NBC's Cal Perry.
That's
having
right.
a moment to geek out over Eurovision with us and update us on the war from Kyiv. The world is feeling this war's impact, from rising gas prices to higher grocery bills. What will it take to endure this food crisis? And later, we have a preview from Pennsylvania, one of 5 states with primary elections tomorrow. That's all just ahead. Stay close. Did you do any grocery shopping this weekend? How much higher were the prices than usual? A lot of basic items are increasingly expensive. Chicken, bread, eggs, and the list kind of goes on and on. Inflation's one cause. The war in Ukraine is also a major factor. According to the International Food Policy Research Institute, Russia and Ukraine export 12% of the world's food calories. Those exports include wheat, corn, and barley. 12% of the world's calories come from Russia and Ukraine. Now, this war has turned farmlands into battlefields. And in a moment, we'll hear how the World Food Program hopes to address this crisis. But let's start in Ukraine with a feature report from NBC foreign correspondent Matt Bradley.
Here in Zaporizhia, Ukraine, farming is a frontline job. It's why Yuri wears body armor and sometimes comes across missiles in his fields.
Do you ever think this job isn't worth it? I'm going to just quit.
I need to work. There are guys fighting in the war, and I'm fighting here in the fields.
Ukraine has been called the breadbasket of Europe. More than 70% of the country is made up of rich agricultural land. Last year alone, Ukraine earned $28 billion from agriculture, exporting vital crops to not just Europe, but the world. Along with Russia, the two countries account for almost 30% of global wheat exports, almost 20% of corn exports, and more than 80% of the world's supply of sunflower oil. Now, the whole world is literally paying the price for this war.
It's not just a military war, it's also an economic war, because the world depended on Ukrainian produce. So now Russia creates problems not only for Ukraine, but also for the whole world.
Farmer Roman Tarasevich estimates that about 80% of the farmland here in Zaporizhia is either occupied by Russian forces or too dangerous to till. But he's among the lucky ones. Even though he says his farm is less than 20 miles from the front lines, he can still plant most of his fields. It's a risk. Rockets have struck his land, but Tarasevich's real problem is what to do with his sunflower harvest. Long a bright symbol of Ukraine, sunflowers have become an agricultural casualty of war. There's a global shortage of sunflower oil because all the sunflower seeds are stuck here, stranded by the war. Ukraine is the world's largest sunflower seed exporter, and prices have surged more than 58% for consumers and restaurateurs. Supermarkets are rationing sunflower oil sales in the UK, Spain, Italy, and Greece. At this time last year, this warehouse was empty. Why can't you get this stock to foreign markets?
Before the war, we were exporting through the ports, and we can't do that right now because of the war.
Russia has blockaded Ukrainian ports, and shipping insurance is sky high, holding a large amount of grain hostage. How has the war affected your business?
We used to have a plan to grow, but for now, we're just working any way we can.
Tarasevich's financial misery has plenty of company around the world. Recently, the World Food Program, the food assistance branch of the UN, has issued calls to reopen Ukraine's ports. Their ask? Open the ports before the current global hunger crisis spins out of control. Food policy experts around the world are sounding the alarm as well. Jada Doyen McKenna is the CEO of the global relief organization Mercy Corps. She's spent more than a decade working to end world hunger.
Russia has basically turned a breadbasket into a war zone. A lot of the men that would be harvesting grain or things from the crops on the ground or replanting crops are now on the front lines fighting a war. So this situation just compounds itself to be catastrophic.
While Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe, Russia is the world's largest exporter of fertilizer. Ever since the war began, the country has halted fertilizer exports, affecting farmers in Brazil, India, and the United States.
We're looking at multiple year disruptions in the food supply system because of the threat under the ports and things not getting out of Ukraine and fertilizer supply. I'm quite worried that the war in Ukraine is going to lead to many more unnecessary deaths.
Agriculture ministers of the G7 nations met in Germany over the weekend to discuss global solutions.
We know now that millions of tons of grains are now stuck in silos across Ukraine. We need to make sure that these cereals are sent to the world. If not, millions of people will be facing famine, particularly in the Middle East and Africa.
Meanwhile, over in Ukraine, farmers like Yuri and Roman continue to do their jobs, despite the risks. Is there an issue with the fact that you're doing all this farming and it doesn't feel like a lot of this stuff is going to be able to be exported?
We need to continue our work, because if we stop, there'll be no food.
A food fight that extends far beyond Ukraine's borders.
That was NBC's Matt Bradley reporting. Let's continue now with Baron Seeger, President and CEO of the World Food Program USA. Mr. Seeger, welcome to the program. Good to have you with us.
Joshua, thanks for putting the spotlight on hunger tonight.
Well, you saw where Matt Bradley put at least part of that spotlight. Is that what has you most concerned tonight, or are there other parts of this issue, other parts of the world that also have the World Food Program most concerned?
I think that we're concerned because we have 48.9 million people on the brink of starvation. And we're seeing consequences that we've not seen in one's lifetime. The panelists before you mentioned consequences. And I would tell you right now that if the ports do not open, up to 50 million people will face hunger in the coming months if grain is not released. That is a devastating consequence.
With regard to those ports, we're talking about ports in Ukraine, on the Black Sea, on the Sea of Azov, near cities like Odessa and Mariupol and others, where a tremendous number of imports come up through the south of Ukraine to not only feed Ukrainians, but also to allow them to continue to feed the rest of Europe. Has your organization been able to have any contact with the Russian government or the Ukrainian government? Have you been on the ground trying to help convince the two sides to make things happen, particularly convince the Russian side to reopen the ports? How has that gone?
So what I would say is we're calling on all global leaders, particularly in the United States, calling on our senators to please pass legislation that will give the World Food Program more funding to purchase more food. We're calling on world leaders. The seas of Odessa must open. We right now have 14 million metric tons of wheat and 16 metric tons of corn that are sitting there ready to be exported. And as one of your guests previously said, these have historically been transferred by cargo ships. Again, before the conflict, just think about it, 98% of the grain went through the sea. And you may think to yourself, well, let's just put it on a train or put it through trucks. It doesn't work because of the infrastructure. You'd have to disembark and restore the grain if you went on trains. And so the most efficient, the only way of getting this grain to countries that desperately need it to avoid famine, and hunger is to put it on these cargo ships.
Well, with regards to grain reserves, India today banned wheat exports, most of them anyway, and India has 10% of the world's grain reserves. So is that a sign that countries are kind of retrenching, that they're sort of holding on to what they have because they see that this problem isn't going to resolve itself anytime soon? What does that tell you?
You know, it's interesting, Joshua. I would go back to when I remember when COVID started, and we had certain countries that were thinking about not exporting rice, a staple that is used by many countries, particularly countries that are landlocked. However, these countries ultimately made the right decision that free trade ultimately helps everybody. I think it's, there's caution. A lot of countries are certainly worried about their own citizens, their own supplies. But I would say that for the World Food Program, we are urging countries to please open up your borders and provide free trade, provide grains, because it is needed, and we need an open market to get it to those countries where it is needed most. Again, we saw it. We were scared when COVID first struck. We saw countries pulling back on exports. However, we did see that ultimately they exported rice and other materials, and look, it worked out fine.
Do you get the sense that world governments are really interested in doing that? I mean, there's all kinds of issues with import, export, with tariffs, duties, international arrangements. We heard this weekend from Britain's Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, about the deal with Northern Ireland and how they might have to find some workarounds because they don't want to have that turn into a hard border. That would be a crisis. So it feels like different countries have so much to worry about with import and export and trade and border issues right now, and everyone just seems a little freaked out. Do you think that the world is ready to take on this challenge? We have to, but are world leaders up to that right now? Are they listening for that right now?
So, Joshua, I would tell you, and I feel very confident about this, and that world leaders are not going to sit around while people starve to death. I truly, honestly believe that. There are consequences to this war unlike no other. Even just today, by the way, on the open markets, we saw grain prices in the U.S. on the exchanges going up by over 5%. So again, we're going to see massive human suffering. And so two things. I have a lot of confidence that world leaders are not going to allow this suffering to take place. The second thing is, don't forget, when people have a lack of food, it causes war. So lack of food is a reason that countries go to war. So when there is food, there tends to be more stability around the world, and that is very important today. All indications are right now, everybody around the world, whether you're a politician or you're having dinner at home right now, everybody understands that food is a non-partisan event, and everybody has a right to food. It is not partisan. Doesn't matter where you are. Food is a human right, and I believe that wherever you are around this world, that we are all in agreement that nobody should die of famine.
And briefly, before I have to let you go, the Secretary of State Antony Blinken is going to speak to the UN Security Council on Wednesday about food insecurity. Suppose the war ended tonight and we could start restarting these pipelines right away. What's that timeline look like in terms of getting the world's food supply back to some semblance of normal? Briefly, before I got to let you go, what's that timeline like?
So, Joshua, what I would tell you, I do think it's a couple of years before it is put back to normal. However, we believe that 50% of the crops in Ukraine could still be harvested. And we think if countries open up their borders, that will allow us to get wheat, corn where it's needed most. So again, my answer to you, if everything opened up tomorrow, we would save a heck of a lot of lives.
Gotcha. 50% that could still be harvested. That is a hopeful number. That is if the war can be ended soon. Barron Seeger, the president and CEO of World Food Program USA. This is super helpful. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Joshua.
Up next, we'll turn to another food shortage, baby formula. A new plan announced today could help restock shelves. But how soon? We'll explain when we come back. There's a bit of good news in the effort to end America's shortage of baby formula. Today, the FDA announced plans for Abbott, one of the nation's top formula manufacturers, to reopen one of its key plants. Abbott could restart production within 2 weeks after meeting certain safety requirements. Formula from that plant could reach shelves within another 8 weeks. The White House is also working to import baby formula. We heard from one viewer in Canada about what they're experiencing. Jeff writes, I just looked at my formula and I have it for a newborn and a 2-year-old. It comes from Toronto and says, country of origin, USA. I am in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. The shelves here are also low, but not bare the way they show it in the States. Good to hear from you up in Winnipeg, Jeff. Thanks very much. For more on the U.S. government's plans, here's NBC Business and Technology correspondent Jolene Kent.
Tonight, possible signs of hope for millions of parents nationwide. The FDA has now struck an agreement with Abbott Nutrition on the next steps to reopen the formula factory in Sturgis, Michigan within 2 weeks. Abbott CEO saying, we know millions of parents and caregivers depend on us, and we're deeply sorry that our voluntary recall worsened the nationwide formula shortage. Now, if the FDA and a federal court give Abbott this green light, it would take that 2 weeks to reopen and another 6 to 8 weeks to get that formula on shelves. Now, the plant shuttered since February over bacteria possibly linked to infant illnesses. Abbott says there's no conclusive evidence of that link from the formula to the infant illnesses. Now, the month-long shortage is hitting low-income families disproportionately hard. After the White House proposed loosening restrictions last week, many parents who rely on government assistance from the Women, Infants, and Children program, known as WIC, are still unable to track down formula. We went to the WIC office here in South Los Angeles today, and I asked the director how frustrating it is when you issue a benefit to go get formula and the parents are unable to get that formula off the shelf. And she told me it's the worst feeling and it's the biggest strain on their staff. And by one estimate, up to 68% of all infant formula sold in the U.S. is purchased through WIC. And in California, WIC offices offer Enfamil, made by Mead Johnson. And then in August, they'll have to switch to Similac for a new contract, and that's made by Abbott. And there's new concern that come this summer, there will be new formulas to introduce and a possibly ongoing shortage with Abbott to grapple with.
That's NBC's Jolene Kent reporting. Hey, a quick reminder, you still have a little bit of time to send us your questions for an interview we're conducting tomorrow from space. We will speak to the NASA astronauts aboard the International Space Station, Charles Lindgren and Jessica Watkins. Anything you want to know, send it our way. We will tape the interview tomorrow morning. You'll see it here Wednesday night. And by the way, if you've got kids in your family who are interested in space, feel free to send their questions too. We'd be happy to have them. We are at NBC Now Tonight on Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. Leave us a brief but brilliant voicemail, 888-575-2NBC. Parents, if you want your kids to leave a voicemail, just make sure both of your voices on there and we know that they've got your permission to leave a message. Or email us now tonight at NBCnews.com, and we'll bring you that conversation Wednesday night. Tomorrow, voters in 5 states are heading to the polls for the midterm primaries. The races to watch and a preview from Pennsylvania before we go. Let's talk politics, starting with a new ruling from the Supreme Court. It's about how campaigns spend their money and pay their debts. Justices ruled in favor of Republican Senator Ted Cruz of Texas. Senator Cruz challenged a federal law limiting how much candidates can be repaid when they loan their own campaigns money. The court ruled 6-3 that the law violates free speech protections. A spokesman for the senator called it a landmark decision that will make it easier for challengers to take on career politicians. In a dissent, Justice Elena Kagan wrote, quote, "The theory of the legislation is easy to grasp. Political contributions that will line a candidate's own pockets given after his election to office pose a special danger of corruption," unquote. A lot of money is pouring into this year's midterm elections. Tomorrow, 5 states will hold their primaries. Catherine says she voted early in North Carolina. Catherine tweeted, "The primary issue that got me to the polls for early voting last week is the looming threat of losing our democracy. This is no longer about politics for me. It's about truth, human decency, and morality. Hashtag hate won't win. Hashtag here right matters. Catherine, thank you very much. And North Carolina holds primaries tomorrow, alongside Kentucky, Oregon, Idaho, and Pennsylvania. Let's preview one of tomorrow's highest profile races, Pennsylvania's Republican primary for Senate. NBC's Dasha Burns is at a campaign event in Scranton.
Kathy Barnett held a rally here in Scranton, making her final case to voters before they head to the polls tomorrow morning. This is a candidate that has completely shaken up this high-stakes primary. And as she stepped into that front-runner spotlight, some of her past has started to resurface and cause some concern. We have been reporting today on images that were circulating on social media that have been verified by NBC News that show Barnett at the Capitol on January 6th. Now, we have known before that she was there, but this is the first time that we are actually seeing her. She's marching toward the Capitol alongside known members of the Proud Boys. And we asked her opponent, her rival in this race, David McCormick, about what he thinks of these images and what he thinks of her candidacy. Here's what he told us. Do you think she is fit for office?
Well, listen, I've gotten to know Kathy on the campaign trail. I respect her personal story. I mean, she's been tested. She was tested 18 months ago when she ran for Congress and lost by 20 percentage points. And now what's happening is she's getting the spotlight, and a lot of questions that should have been answered a long time ago, that all the scrutiny that I got and others have gotten are now coming to the fore. And she has to answer all those questions, whether it's about military service, career, whatever it is.
Do you think she's answered them properly?
Well, she needs to answer them. I don't think she's answered them yet.
We reached out to the campaign for comment on those images. They told us Kathy was in D.C. to support President Trump and demand election accountability. Any assertion that she participated in or supported the destruction of property is intentionally false. She has no connection whatsoever to the Proud Boys. Meanwhile, on the Democratic side of the race, the frontrunner there, Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman, had a stroke on Friday. He is in the hospital, and his campaign announced today that he will not be able to attend his event tomorrow night because he'll still be in the hospital. Sounds like his wife Giselle will be headlining that event instead.
That's NBC's Dasha Burns for us tonight in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And tomorrow we'll have live special coverage of the primaries. I'll provide analysis of the big races. Chuck Todd and Kristen Welker will anchor our Meet the Press primary night special tomorrow at 8 p.m. If you're voting tomorrow, let us know what's going on where you are, what the big issues are. We're at NBC Now Tonight on social media. Leave us a voicemail or send us an email. Until we meet again, I'm Joshua Johnson. We'll see you for live election coverage tomorrow. Good night.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.